showcasing extraordinary people who are doing incredible things to make our world a better place. This is Close-Up Television. I'm your host, Jim Masters, and thanks so much for joining us. On today's episode, we celebrate Rosie Ward. Rosie is a leadership coach, consultant, keynote speaker, podcast host, CEO of Salveo Partners LLC, and author of Rehumanizing the Workplace and How to Build a Thriving Culture at Work. Through her coaching and consulting work, Rosie has helped thousands of leaders and teams become more effective by learning how to navigate the messiness of being human in this never-ending disruptive world. It all boils down to our mindset, she says, and shifting from one of scarcity and self-protection to one of openness, curiosity, and impact. It requires getting out of our comfort zone to do the important work to upgrade our mindset to support the skills people are trying to hone. Rosie's coaching work involves helping her clients identify the influence of how our childhoods shape our adult years. In fact, she points out more than 70% of the programming our brains download in the first 10 years of our lives are fundamentally flawed, negative, and self-sabotaging. Yet this programming is still running the show for many of us in our adult lives. Additionally, we are hardwired as a species to seek out things that are familiar and provide comfort, which is counter to what our current world demands of us. In those exact moments where we need to shift our mindset, adapt, and show up differently, our brains dig in even harder and cling tightly to what is familiar and our childhood programming that is designed to keep us safe, even though flawed. And that gap between the world demands and our own innate biological instincts continues to grow. That's why Rosie is passionate about normalizing the messy aspects of being human. Having coached all types of leaders from global and billion-dollar companies to nonprofits and government and everything in between, she's learned how common the human condition is and what it takes to move through it with resilience and foster greater collaboration and impact. Now, to learn more about Rosie's work, she joins me in the Close-Up Television studios for this exclusive interview. Rosie, thanks for coming up to the studio here and joining us at Close-Up Television. Did the radio shows, that was fantastic, but wanted to dig in a little bit deeper, fascinated by your work. Good to have you with us.
It's good to be here.
You know, I like to know what makes people tick, what inspires them, what drives them, what motivates them to find, you know, on their journey of life, the things that motivate them and inspire them. So when you look at your career in the coaching world and all the wonderful work you're doing, what are some of those things on your life's journey, your path, that pointed you in the direction of doing this work you do so well today?
That's such a good question. I think for me, honestly, I am obsessed with normalizing the messiness of being human. It is messy and it is hard to be human, especially today. And I think I've learned that when we're in that mode of feeling like we're not enough or less than, we think it's just us.
Right.
And I had my own journey of thinking that I needed to be perfect to be loved, thinking that I had to achieve to have value, and it served me well. I mean, I launched a successful business and was, had a lot of accolades, but there's this part of you that's always like chasing the next thing.
Yes.
And when I learned that I'm not alone in that, I realized, okay, there's a whole group of us that are exhausted, that are running around trying to hide our flaws, hide our inadequacies. And now you put a bunch of us together in a team, in a workplace, in a community, and you wonder why we have defensiveness and disconnection. And so for me, it was my own growth journey and kind of trying to just come to terms with being kinder and gentler to myself. It was also being in workplaces, quite frankly, that sucked the well-being out of me and were dehumanized. And I started to see how that made people even feel worse.
Right.
And so it's this combination for me that just drives me, that I feel like no one should have to go to work, and I'm sorry, but work for a jerk. No one should have to go to work and feel like their life and their light and their sparkle is being sucked out of them. And there's way too many of those experiences happening. And life is too short to walk through life feeling like you have to hide who you are. And so it's really that combination that just drives me, honestly, every day.
Was it one event that triggered all of this understanding, or did you already know it sort of underneath, but you were just going with the flow to do what you had to do? Or was it a accumulation of things that built up and then you said, this is enough. I'm moving on to a different way of doing things?
I think it was accumulation. I think that from a workplace standpoint, twice in my life, I had experienced a toxic workplace. And the first was I had finished my master's degree and I was working in an organization and I wasn't even there very long and I started getting sick. I started gaining weight. I started to turn from an overachiever to watching the clock. And my friends said, Rosie, what's wrong with you? You don't seem like you. And that was an aha for me of, we need to start to look at well-being in the workplace differently and look at culture and look at leadership, because I saw what it did to me. And as I was working on my PhD and I started to see this interconnection of the health and well-being of the organizations where we work and the health and well-being of us as individuals are super interconnected. And so that kind of drove my consulting career and starting to do work. And then fast forward, and the second time in my life, I'm at a consulting firm where once they celebrated challenging the status quo and they celebrated doing things differently, they joined a larger firm, which happens a lot, and suddenly that was a liability. Suddenly it was go into your box, drink the Kool-Aid, don't challenge, stop being you, basically. And it was awful. And
don't rock the boat, don't upset the cart, just...
And I literally, the only time in my life I got put on a performance improvement plan for bringing them in too much Rosie-related revenue. Go figure that one. Makes no sense. They were trying to push me out the door. But we were dealing with a son who had massive health problems. Now I'm a mom. Now it has a ripple effect. I would go home crying, and you're trying to not let it impact you.
Yeah.
And then I get calls from preschool that, oh, your son's like biting other kids and stuff. And I hit my wall, and I'm like, this is crap. No one should have to do this. And I knew that I wasn't alone. And I'm like, why is it okay for workplaces to absolutely do things that are crappy, unethical, but not illegal, and the ripple effect that it has, and it leads into your home and your family.
Right.
And I just thought, this is not okay. And so it was really, those are the two like fulcrum points, but it was really just the cumulative stuff along the way. But that was a tipping point where I said, and that's when I resurrected Salveo Partners, said, I'm done with this, and I'm on a mission to have this not be the norm anymore, and let's help other workplaces become more human.
How do you define, there's many different levels of it, but how do you define a toxic workplace? People hear that and they probably think, oh, that means there's always a lot of yelling, screaming, and arguing, but there's a lot of other ways that it can be toxic with and without that, right?
Yeah, and actually there was a great article that came out last year in MIT Sloan Management Review, which was like the most comprehensive analysis of toxic workplaces, and the number one attribute is lack of respect. So you think about people not feeling like they're treated as a human being, they're not valued, is the number one attribute. But also you have things like burnout, overload of work, right? It's just unattainable expectations, poor leadership, that lack of respect, lack of clarity of expectations and accountability.
Boundaries too, like they'll call you at 10:30 at night and want an answer to something when you're in bed.
Yeah. Like,
can't wait till the morning?
Yeah. Yep. And so all of those things really contribute to a toxic workplace. So yeah, like I don't know a lot of workplaces where there's yelling and screaming, but there can be everything from turf protection, not collaborating, throwing people under the bus, taking credit for other people's work, unmanageable workloads, lack of clarity of expectations, honestly, people pleasing. I work with so many leaders that refuse to have a clear and direct conversation around expectations and improvement because they don't want to hurt someone's feelings, and all it does is piss other people off and frustrates people. And so there's a lot of attributes, but it gets into that, and it's just it's a combination of all of those things.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating, and I would love to see the updated research because it came out before the pandemic, but Jeffrey Pfeffer from Stanford wrote a book called Dying for a Paycheck, and he said that these toxic workplaces are the 5th leading cause of death in the United States and 8% of our healthcare spend.
Well, you see people sometimes even taking it to levels of violence and reacting because of something that happened at the workplace, and then it gets to be really dangerous on so many levels, right?
Oh, 100%. I actually did some work with a group that is all about security with like our systems, and they do a lot of active shooter drills and other things, and they had me come in to do some work around the messiness of being human and emotional well-being and psychological safety, because I'm like, guess what? In this world, we're not thinking about when that stuff isn't there and people are triggered, that's actually the precursor to some of these things that you're training people on, but we need to maybe look further upstream of what are some of the things that contribute to some of these acts of violence that we're not thinking about, and maybe we could have a dent in. We can't fix all of it, but maybe we can have a dent in some of it.
When did you decide, okay, I understand all this and this is what I'm doing in terms of making changes for myself and what I want to do in my career, to then taking it to the next level and saying, I'd like to actually be a leadership coach, a consultant. I'd like to actually help others do some of what I've learned to be able to do myself?
When I first became a coach, I didn't even know coaching was a thing. This was back in 2004. Like, it wasn't even really an industry back then. I started when I was 12.
Of course. It's always 12.
It's always
Me too.
12, right?
Me too.
So I was primarily working with work sites. And I remember I went to a conference and I was sitting next to Jackie Bridle Dietrich, and she said to me that she was a coach. And I'm like, what is that? And I started talking to her and I was like, God, that makes sense. And so I called up my husband and I said, honey, I'm going to be a coach. I don't exactly know what that means, but I'm going to be a coach. And I had always kind of been a train the trainer. So I had other roles where I would train other like fitness professionals, or I trained other people to lead programs that I led. So that's always kind of been in my, professional DNA, if you will. And so then adding in coaching just kind of felt like, well, that was a missing piece. And so even today, there's a lot of like, whether it's blogs or books or workshops, we have a lot of train the trainers. I feel like, to me, it doesn't do any good to have this knowledge or to have these insights if you're going to just keep it to yourself or just work with a client. Like, I feel very passionate about if this can help other people, because if one person's struggling with it, I know other people are.
Right.
And what I've seen now with coaching literally thousands of people and working with hundreds of teams is there is this commonality we all have. And so if one person's struggling with it and I can normalize it and go, hey, you're not alone, whether I do a little video clip on social media, whether I write about it, whether I talk about it, people are like, oh, yeah. And so I've just become super passionate about let's normalize this and let's stop pretending that it doesn't exist and let's find a way forward.
So how do you describe your style of coaching?
My style of coaching, I combine a lot of different methodologies and trainings that I've had, but I think mine is one where I'm going to invite my clients to get deeply uncomfortable. Like, I'm like, if you want to just sit here and think I'm just going to give you a little stretch assignment, like, I'm going to ask you to look back at the first 10 years of your life. I'm going to ask you to get deeply uncomfortable. And I'm also going to kind of tell you when you're being small. Like, in a nice way, I'm going to tell you when you're being a butthead. So if you don't want someone to give you that feedback, I'm not a match.
You got to cut through it all, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they just keep sweeping it under the rug. And,
yep.
What was your relationship like with your mother when you were a kid?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's not trying to get, because you have to be careful of boundaries. I'm not trying to get into psychology where that's scope creep, but you have to understand that in the first 10 years of our life, we download programming.
Right.
Our brains are downloading program that guides our actions from observing our surroundings. So we all learned like when to be quiet and when to speak up. We learned what was right, what was wrong. We learned when we're going to be accepted, when we're going to be rejected. And all of that formed in those first 10 or so years of our life. And what we don't realize is that 10-year-old version of ourselves is actually the person who's reacting today. It's not the 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old. When something happens, it's that 10-year-old insecure self that's getting triggered. And here's the problem. 70% of that programming we've downloaded is fundamentally flawed, it's negative, and it's self-sabotaging. And so again, you go back to now you have a bunch of us in a community, in a workplace, and it's basically a bunch of insecure 10-year-olds running around. And look at 10-year-olds, look at middle school. Like it's a very challenging time. And so I just think we have to recognize that. And if we don't go back to that and help people see, holy crap, I created this narrative because this was going on in my life. Well, maybe it made sense at the time, but you're not 10 anymore, and you can let go of that.
Right.
Maybe you had a chaotic household, so now you have this deep need to be in control, right? Because everything felt so out of control, but now that need to control is hurting you. Or maybe you had a household where, you got yelled at or in trouble if you got anything less than 100%, and now you have this really unhelpful perfectionist tendency. Well, that isn't serving you well, and guess what? You're not trying to please your parents anymore.
Right.
And so if we don't go back and understand how and why some of these narratives got formed and even identify them, we don't realize that they're hijacking us and we can't unfold it. And so that's the process I take people through, is help them identify what makes up their psychological immune system and the faulty programming, so that we can basically rewire that programming, for lack of a better way of phrasing it.
I don't know if you ever saw the series on PBS with John Bradshaw, but it was a really incredible series on the inner child and how not dealing with and acknowledging the inner child later in life, in adulthood, you will act out as if you're still that kid that has unresolved regret, disappointment, fear, whatever it is, and you will act out in adulthood. I interviewed him on PBS, and it was fascinating. And this is the first time I really grasped that concept of how, because you have people even say, you've seen people say to everybody, oh, you're acting like a child, you're acting like a kid. In reality, they probably are, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's that 10-year-old version of ourselves is showing up. And again, it could be 15, it could be 8. I just say 10 because that's kind of the, nice, easy number.
Yeah.
But that is the version that's getting triggered, and it's happening unconsciously. That's the thing we don't realize. This isn't a conscious thing. And so if you think back to, if you don't heal the wounds of that inner child, and there's two pieces. One, there is, if I had a traumatic childhood, this is where therapy is super helpful, and I do need to heal some of that emotional stuff and the trauma, and there's merit and value, and that's work that needs to be done. And if you also don't do the work to rewire the programming, then that can only get you so far. And so they complement each other really very well. But I don't care if someone's had a happy childhood or a traumatic childhood. It's in our human DNA. We are hardwired to seek out familiarity and comfort. We are hardwired to be on alert for danger and threats. And our brains don't know the difference between an actual physical threat, like something's charging at me, or a perceived social threat. You might think worse of me. You might judge me. You might reject me. We go into this self-protection mode. We are hardwired to use Brene Brown's language, to armor up and self-protect, and we don't realize we're doing it. But it's those strategies that we innately use to protect ourselves that erode trust in the workplace and get in our way of belonging and connection, and that's what we have to heal in people.
A lot of people might be thinking, okay, we're talking about childhood, so we're really probably focusing on childhoods that weren't that great, that were traumatic. But sometimes you can have a childhood that was actually so good that you want to stay in that world, that you want to go back to the childhood. You want everything the way the childhood was, because it was really a good time for everybody.
Well, yeah, and even, here's what I've learned, though, is even people who
I
really...
did like 10. 10 was a good year.
But even people who did have a happy childhood, we still download programming because we're alert for threats. So it could be that it wasn't that you got in trouble, but it just became a norm of, no, like, I need to perform. That's what I do. That's what's expected of me. And now it gets in your way because you think your value is attached to what you perform versus who you are. Or, so it's not always that something bad happened. Going back to, we observe our surroundings, and it's like a meaning-making system. We learn how the world works. Like, no, you need to perform, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. And that starts to drive us, but we're in a different world now. And so it doesn't matter, happy childhood or traumatic childhood or anything in between. This is part of being human, and that's what we have to be able to reconcile to be effective in today's environment.
Let's talk about how you facilitate this. How do you bring people to the table to get them to open up about the childhood and things of that nature? Maybe they're resistant to doing that, or it was painful, or they're like, I don't have time for that. I just got to get the work done and profit has to happen. How do you get them to come to the table as you're consulting them?
That's funny, because I literally had a conversation yesterday. One of our clients were doing a bunch of development work with their leaders, and it includes group work, but also includes one-on-one coaching. And one of them, and this has happened a handful of times, is like, I don't know why you're asking me to look back at my childhood. I don't think that our organization should be paying for a consultant that's looking at this. This is none of their business. I just want to work on leadership skills. And I kind of chuckle and go, God love being human. If someone's threatened by something, it's okay. But my job as a consultant and my job as a coach is to, first and foremost, I have to normalize the human condition. And so there's some time just educating of, this is normal, and let's just talk about how our brains work. So I do a little bit of education about how the world works, how our brain works, so that they understand what I'm going to then ask them to do. Because I think otherwise you're like, why are you asking me to do this? So I start out with all of our clients with this normalization to say, here's the deal. we download this programming in the first 10 years of our life. It helps form this psychological immune system we all have. And whether we realize it or not, that immune system is getting in our way of making progress on goals that are important to us. It's part of the human condition. So if you want to move forward, we're going to have to look at that. Growth doesn't happen in your comfort zone. This is a safe space. It's confidential. But even though you're all from the same team, like our sessions is between us, right? And so part of it is, how do you set the stage of psychological safety? How do you ensure confidentiality? And then you just have to keep assuring people like there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. Welcome to being human. Congratulate yourself on being human. I know that this is messy. Stick with, I promise you if you do the work, but I'm not a magic wand. So I always say I'm not a magic wand, but if you do the work, this is truly a transformative experience. And that's really all you can do as a coach and a consultant is have the tools to make it safe, be deliberate about your actions, and then invite people to the table. And sometimes, it doesn't happen that often, but sometimes people are so threatened, they're like, heck no, not happening. And I'm like, it's unfortunate, but I'm like, I can't help you, and nor can anybody else. But if you're willing at some point, happy to revisit.
Is this work you've done on yourself as well? That's why you can relate to your clients?
Oh yeah, I mean, anybody who's a good coach or consultant on anything, if you haven't done the work yourself, like every good coach gets coached, every good consultant, has someone pull them out of their own way. Every good therapist gets therapy. I mean, so yeah, I've had coaches help me in multiple areas of my life, and I've gone through this process, the immunity to change process, twice. Actually, I've gone through it 3 times. And I know how painful it is, and I share my own experience because I think that they need to understand that I'm not just some expert coming in. It's like, no, I get it. Again, it's part of being human. Let's look at your journey and know I can tell you exactly how at least it can play out if you're willing to trust me.
You're on a mission to rehumanize the workplace. Tell us about that.
Well, going back to my 2 experiences I've had of dehumanized workplaces and how it sucked the well-being out of me. And everywhere I go, when people say, hey, what do you do? And I always start with, our purpose is to rehumanize the workplace so people can bring their best selves to work and home. And people go, oh my gosh, and they start telling me horror stories. Everywhere I go, I hear horror stories of poor leadership, being treated like crap, just all kinds of stuff. And so when I think about rehumanizing workplaces, at its core, it's, can each and every one of us go to a workplace, whether we physically go in or we're virtual or hybrid, and feel like we can show up as our authentic self versus wearing masks, wearing armor, where we can be us and our gifts and talents are appreciated, that we belong, that we matter, that we're valued, and that we get to learn and grow, like we're not stagnant. We get to have work that is an opportunity for us to meaningfully contribute, and that we have something left to give back into our personal life at the end of the day. Like that's a human workplace. Can people show up and stop this needing to be their 10-year-old on-guard self, because it's causing all kinds of problems. And so that's really what it is. So it means there's clarity of purpose and values. It means that there's psychological safety, physical safety, if that is part of the work, that there is growth, that we're not keeping people in their comfort zones, that we're guiding them to become a better version of themselves. More empathy, more community. All of it. That's really what a humanized workplace is from my perspective.
Have you found over the years we've been going away from that, and that's why we've got to bring it back?
I think that there's a divide happening, and why I say that is there actually is a really big movement, largely led by conscious capitalism, that is showing that there's a better way to do business. Also, Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy have done work with deliberately developmental organizations. So there's some bodies of work that are publishing out there to say, hey, there's a better way to do business, a human first, and they're blowing their competition out of the water. And so I think that's encouraging, where more businesses are looking at, oh, maybe we can change our business model. It's not the old Jack Welch model. It is a human model, and the numbers come. But at the same time, there's almost this divide of people that's too scary. It's unfamiliar. If I know how to lead a numbers-driven way and I don't know how to lead a humanistic way because it's uncomfortable and messy, now I'm going to double down over here. So you do kind of have a bit of a divide happening, but I'm a research geek. I look at all the numbers. When you start to see that in this day and age, especially when you hear about turnover tsunami and the Great Resignation, Great Reshuffle, whatever term you want to throw at it, people, especially talented people, have more of a choice. And they are looking for organizations where they can thrive, where they can flourish, where they can grow. And the organizations that keep thinking that doesn't matter, that's fluff, I don't need to do that, are struggling. They're struggling to hire people. They're struggling to retain people. And I think that it's going to become clearer and clearer, but there's still a long way to go.
But you're on a mission.
I am on a mission. I am.
Rosie's
yes.
on a mission. You know, there are so many different elements to this too, which I think is fascinating. Is this something where you're working with individuals or you're working with teams, groups? Tell us about some of the application of the work.
Yeah, so we work with entire organizations. We work with teams. We work with leaders. It's a little bit of everything. So it depends. So like with one of our clients that we're really embedded in, we did work with literally their entire organization and helped them clarify their purpose and clarify the behavioral anchors that are necessary for their purpose to be realized. So think about like your values. Then we work with, they have culture ambassadors. So we bring their culture ambassadors together several times a year, and we do development with them of how do you be a conduit for positive change? How do you lead and influence others, whether you have the title or role or not? And how do you be a steward of the culture that you're working so hard to create? We then do work with their individual leaders, so individual coaching, but also group development work. So that's just one example of how we're doing lots of different layers. And at the core, it's about, can we help clients build a core and common language and tools to help them when their humanity gets the best of them, and to help them keep coming back to living their purpose, keep coming back to the things that make up a thriving culture. That's the ultimate goal that we work on with our clients, and then the various kind of levers, if you will, that will help them get there.
How has the pandemic, from your perspective, really changed things? You mentioned the Great Resignation, and a lot of people have left very comfortable corporate jobs and other things like that to sort of carve out their own path, maybe to get the respect and the inspiration that they're seeking. And they're entrepreneurs. Maybe they're starting their own businesses or whatever the case may be. There's been a shift in, or maybe they want more time with their loved ones and family and kids. It's been a monumental test of the human condition.
It has been, and here's what's interesting is the pandemic was kind of the starting point. But if you look at the data, the American Psychological Association has reported that 87% of adults believe that there's been a constant stream of crises since 2020 with no break, and it's taking its toll. Yeah. So you start to look at all that has transpired, and people are tired, people are exhausted, people are stressed. And there's another stat that I've been using lately that since 2019, our capacity to handle change is half of what it was. So it makes sense, right? If we have this constant stream of crises, if we're stressed, if we're burned out, we can't handle change and disruption much. And so how that is fed in is I think that people are reevaluating what matters to them. I think that they're reevaluating what does work look like in my life? What am I willing to put up with? You know, do I want to have golden handcuffs on anymore? Do I want to go do something more meaningful? Do I want to, finally retire? Do I want to retire early? People really are reevaluating their life. And I don't think that that's going to change anytime soon if you look at the data.
Yeah, right.
And so where I go back to, organizations need to either reset and really reprioritize how they're leading, how they're just going about day-to-day business, or they're going to be irrelevant.
Right.
That is showing up more and more because, again, I would say COVID was like the start, or not even the start. It was a tipping point because let's be honest, pre-COVID, a lot of our business as usual was only working for a small minority of people in a very big place of privilege. And so pre-pandemic, because Jeffrey Pfeffer's research was pre-pandemic, our world normalized exhaustion, burnout, et cetera. And then I think the pandemic hit, and now you look at all of the stuff that keeps transpiring over and over and over since then, and it's just a perfect storm of the rules have changed, and we can't do what we've always done. And if you want to keep doing what you've always done, good luck to you, but you're going to have a hard time finding people. You're going to have a hard time growing, innovating, being profitable.
And some are, you see it.
You are.
They can't get employees. They can't get, because people just don't want to go back to that, whatever that was. They don't want to go back to it.
Yeah, they're like, life's too short. peace out, not happening.
Having effective leaders, it's really critical to the overall experience, right? Tell us about, I know the definition of a leader has changed in a positive way too. They're much more roll up the sleeves, sort of immerse themselves, more empathetic, more compassionate, listening more. They're not just up in the ivory tower looking down at everything. People, they might even know some of the employees' names. Hey, Bob, hey, Sandy. Tell us about how that has shifted and why it's critical to have a leader that's like that.
It's a great question, and I think there's two things. One is the data is all pointing to the future is human-centric leadership. And when you talk about the definitions of leadership changing, I think we also have to recognize that leadership never has been and never will be about a title or a role or a position or authority. We all know people who have those things, and they are in no way a leader. And we know people who don't, and they absolutely are. And so there's a lot of definitions out there that are similar. We happen to define leadership as it's maximizing our positive impact on the world by becoming our best fully authentic self and then supporting those around us to break past barriers and step into their greatness. And I know that's a mouthful, but when you think about it, if I also then happen to have a formal leadership role, I have an additional responsibility because of the influence I have over culture, over the employee experience, and ultimately the customer experience. So if I formally have to lead people, I do need to be more human. I do need to be more empathetic. I do need to lead in a more human-centric way, or it's not going to work so well. But let's be honest, every single one of us has an opportunity to say, can I maximize my positive impact in this project, in this conversation, in this situation, in this meeting? And in today's day and age, we can't sit back and wait for someone else more qualified to step up. We need everybody to have that mindset of, I am a leader and I can make a difference here. And to have enough psychological safety where we have colleagues that will call us on our crap and call us to greatness when we're playing it small. And that's what we need to be able to thrive into the future, because our world's not going to get any less disruptive or any less volatile.
Let's talk about some of the tools and techniques and strategies you actually implement to facilitate the work.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things, and it depends on where an organization is. So if an organization truly has not done the work to clarify their purpose, like they'll say, oh, we have a mission and vision, it's not the same as a purpose. So Simon Sinek, start with why. So we will help them with a process to get really clear about why do you exist. And then we will do the work with them to not just take their values from a website, but say, well, what are the behaviors that are actually critical or embody this value in action, and help them create deliberate practices so it becomes part of day-to-day operations. So it's not, oh, once a year we hear about this, but on a day in, day out basis, we are reinforcing that this is how we behave in this organization. And it's from onboarding to, team meetings to performance management conversations. So we call it our lighthouse, but start with the lighthouse and get clarity of who you are. So we will do that work with organizations, and then all of I call it the wraparound systems that help that be lived on a daily basis versus it was a nice exercise with a consultant. We will work with leaders and teams to help them be more future ready. So it might be a combination of individual coaching. We also do a lot of work to help them learn how to be more self-aware, build emotional intelligence, have better feedback conversations, better lead into ambiguity, be more empathetic, be more courageous, because that's really a critical piece of it. We will do work with teams to help them be more cohesive, to help them get on the same page, to help them better navigate conflict, to help them just overall be more effective. So those are the kind of the different levels and layers, and within that we have a whole variety of tools and resources that we will bring in to help a team, help an organization, depending on what makes sense and where they're at on their journey.
What is Fusion 2.0?
Fusion 2.0 is a conference that we started. There's a theme with me. When I get frustrated with something, I'm like, screw it, I'm going to create something if it doesn't exist. And many years ago, I was sitting at a conference and I left yet another crappy session. How often do you people are on their phones, they leave. And I was sitting with some colleagues and I was like, God, is this the best we can do? Like, this is what people are learning. We're saying the same old crap. This is just awful, but we need to go get continuing ed credits. And I just said, why do HR people go to HR conferences, and wellness people go to wellness conferences, and safety people go to safety conferences, and leaders go to leader conferences, And I get you want to have like-minded people, but the problem is they learn stuff in silos, and then they go back to an organization, and they're trying to get the attention of the same people. And I think well-intended, but we end up unintentionally undermining each other's efforts. And so a thought was, why can't we bring all these disciplines together, because it's a human experience at work, and look at how do they all intersect, because they do, and how can we have more collaborative, better conversations to create more future-ready human workplaces. And so that was really the impetus behind Fusion 2.0, is there isn't a multidisciplinary conference. We aren't having these conversations, and can we shift it? And so we've had it a couple times now. We had it in person pre-COVID, and we had it virtually, and really just trying to spark a different way of learning and connecting and building community for people who believe in human-centric workplaces. And how can we, there's power in numbers. So it's not just go learn, but it's all about building community. So how can we together make this critical mass of people who are going back to their workplaces or going back as consultants who support workplaces to usher in a different way of doing business?
Why do you think so many people and businesses are struggling so much now? Is it the 24/7, 7-day-a-week culture that's adding to it? Is it social media, the internet? What's happening?
I think that all contributes, but I will say fundamentally, this is what I see, is that we live and work in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And what that really means is that our world is disruptive. And it was disruptive before COVID. It's more disruptive now. And why that is important is that disruption is where we grow. Disruption is where we get better. Disruption is where we evolve. But disruption bumps us up against our human DNA, that hardwiring we all have to seek out familiarity and to seek out comfort. It's in us. That's what it means to be human. Yeah. And what I see is that the more VUCA our world gets, the more that instinct or that hardwiring to cling tightly to what's familiar kicks in. And so you have this gap that is widening, and it's widening more and more and more. And I see that is at the root of where we have people showing up really in just bizarre ways, behaving in ways that are disconnected, sometimes uncivil, not humanized in any way, are avoiding change, resisting change. And that's what you see, is this gap widens because it's our self-protective instincts. But the world is saying, no, you should be fine with the ambiguity. You should be fine with volatility. But that's not how we're wired. And so I think that the core of us to be effective is we've got to recognize that that's what's happening and not argue with it, not pretend it's not happening, and instead look at how do we close that gap. So basically, how do we upskill and upgrade people's wiring or programming to be able to lead themselves and others in this VUCA environment? And that, to me, is the key. And if we don't do that, we're not going to get to where we want to go.
You said the rules have really changed since COVID. You've seen that probably firsthand, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I think since COVID, and again, going the past 3 years, people are reevaluating what matters to them. They are realizing that there's been a power shift. Korn Ferry actually put out a report last year looking at the power shift from the hierarchical leader from a me to a we. There is this collective power of, hey, we want to be treated like human beings. You're starting to see there's a rise of unionization happening because people are saying enough, that we want to have our rights protected. And I just think that when you look at being able to, the war for talent, I don't like using war metaphors in business, but if you're trying to hire good people and you're trying to innovate, I was just having a conversation this morning with someone. We were talking about innovation, the old good to great from Jim Collins. Great isn't good enough anymore. Mm-hmm. We have to be exceptional to thrive in this environment, and you can't get to exceptional using the same old thinking, the same old mindsets, the same old business practices. So it's a different game. In order to get there, we got to be willing to get uncomfortable. And I think people don't want to necessarily do the work. They want a quick fix. They want a instant gratification. They don't want to know that there's a messy middle they have to go through to get to the next level of them. But that's really the people who get it and are going to do that work and are investing in the long haul are the ones that are going to come out as a better, stronger version of themselves.
Some, because of the opportunity to work from home, want to stay home doing the work even if the office has gone back, how has the remote working sort of affected us in terms of those relationships? I mean, when you were in the office atmosphere, there was the good, bad, the ugly, which you had to deal with it, and it was part of the equation. Now there's a lot of people that are like, I don't even want to go in.
Yeah. There is an interesting divide, and I think there is a generational thing. You start to look at actually some of the Gen Zs and even some of the millennials are actually needing that human connection and are wanting to go in. They don't like being remote. Not everybody, but if you look at some of the data, some people are like, heck no, like I'm good because I have better work-life harmony. I don't have the commute time, et cetera. And so I think it's not a one-size-fits-all. I think you have to look at what is your industry, because not all industries even have that option, and what makes sense for your workforce. And if you are going to be hybrid or you're remote, there's a different level of intentionality to foster that human connection. So maybe it's getting together once in a while, but it's more from a social relationship building. So it makes it easier to be compassionate and give people grace, because in the absence of data, our brain's filled in with story. So if you and I work together and we don't have a relationship, then if you don't respond to an email or I misread something, it's easy for me to start to go, oh, and make up a story about you. But if I know you, it's like, oh yeah, Jim's busy or whatever. And so, so there is something to be said for whether we're in person or not, we have to find a way to foster relationship building in order to then get the tasks done as well.
How do you see the future of leadership, and how do we effectively sort of develop ourselves and others to sort of navigate some of these things you're talking about?
There's been a lot of great studies out there that have done this, and I'm just going to speak to one. Brene Brown and her colleagues are now more than 12 years into research, and they have asked leaders globally, what's the future of leadership? Who's going to still be standing in 5 years? And what they found is the future demands braver leaders and courageous cultures. And what that means is braver leaders, meaning are we able to show up as the best version of ourselves? Are we able to lean into that VUCA-ness? Are we able to lean into vulnerability and discomfort? Or are we going to cling tightly to those armored self-protective strategies we use to protect ourselves? And can we create environments where that self-protective need, that armor, is no longer necessary nor rewarded? And so that's really, the more VUCA our world gets, we need people who can upshift that. And so I think what that requires is there's two aspects of leadership. There's inner game stuff and outer game. Inner game is the mindset, that programming that we have. It's our emotional intelligence, our identity, our values. And that's the stuff that used to be called soft skills, but it's not soft skills.
Not anymore.
They're essential or power skills. But it's messy and it's not easy and it's vulnerable-based work and it's cringy. And then there's outer game stuff. So feedback, skills, competencies, like all of those things that we also need to do. And the inner stuff runs the outer stuff. It's the inner programming that runs what you see on the outside. And so we have to work on both. But I think the future of leadership is we have to recognize the inner work has to happen first. So if you're trying to teach people how to set goals and strategize and give feedback, but they're doing it on this inner programming that is still their 10-year-old self, it's not going to work. And so we have to invite people into the necessary but messy work to learn how to show up with courageous vulnerability, to learn how to upgrade that inner programming and close that gap between the VUCA world and our own human DNA.
You say there's 5 rehumanizing principles that we can really focus on in our work, but also that can translate into our relationships, family, and communities as well. Tell us about those.
So the 5 rehumanizing principles, the first is build a lighthouse. So that is, do we have clarity at an organizational level, individual level, even family level of our why, our purpose, and the values and the behavioral anchors that are necessary for that purpose to be realized? And so when we talk about showing up courageously in this volatile environment, we don't just mean, hey, it's free for all. We ground ourselves in our values and our purpose. So the lighthouse acts like that calming force, like it does for ships. It cuts through the fog, tells them where to go in dark and stormy waters. The lighthouse does the same for us individually and collectively. So if you do the work to get clear and then have deliberate practices where it wasn't a nice exercise, but you literally ground yourself in that before you have a difficult conversation, before you make a decision, before you try to tackle some kind of problem. That's what the lighthouse principle is. It's a grounding force, but it also provides clarity and energy as well. The second rehumanizing principle is create fearless environments. So we have to have these environments of psychological safety where people can be human. They can admit they made a mistake. They can ask for help, those types of things. And if we don't have that, we're not going to get to where we want to go. And so if you're a formal leader, you go first. If you're the parent of the household, you go first. You admit mistakes. You say, hey, this isn't going to be easy and it's okay. Hey, you don't have to be perfect. I want to hear your ideas, right? So are we taking intentional steps to create those fearless environments? The third is wait in the messy middle, which is that whole, there isn't an easy button, there isn't a fast forward button for change, and we need to really be able to recognize that to upgrade that inner programming to meet the demands of our world, we've got to get uncomfortable. And we've got to wait in the messy middle, which is hard to do if you don't have a fearless environment, and hard to do if you're floundering and don't have a lighthouse to guide you, right? So they all kind of build on each other. The fourth is show up as a leader, that leadership's not a title or role, and fundamentally, are we in all areas of our life looking for, am I maximizing my positive impact here? Am I showing up as the best version of me? And am I calling others to greatness? Can't do that if I haven't waited in the messy middle, right? Can't do that if I don't have a fearless environment. And then the last is find your tribe. And that's not go find people who look and sound like you because there's safety in numbers. Find your tribe is about diversifying and building relationships because there's strength in numbers, because culture is not the CEO's responsibility. Culture is not HR's responsibility. Right. Culture is everybody's responsibility. And so we are neurobiologically hardwired to be in connection. And so find your tribe is about how do we build and strengthen diverse relationships to start to create the change that we want to see.
You also have written 2 books. Congratulations on
that. Thank you.
Tell us about Rehumanizing the Workplace.
Rehumanizing the Workplace is our latest book, and that launched right at the start of the pandemic. And that really goes through those 5 rehumanizing principles, and it also has tips at every single chapter of how can you as the reader, regardless of title or role, show up as a person who can lead and influence positive change and really create more human workplaces and create more effective, future-ready workplaces.
Tell us about the book before, too.
The book before is called How to Build a Thriving Culture at Work. That came out at the end of 2014, and that really provides a blueprint, kind of a step-by-step of how do you build a culture that thrives. And that was really the precursor to rehumanizing. So that one, we use a metaphor of building a house, where building a thriving culture at work is similar to building a structurally sound and aesthetically pleasing house. So if you skip steps, use outdated materials. So that gives a lot of, just step-by-step guides, kind of a manual, if you will, of here's different things that you can do and here's examples. And the Rehumanizing the Workplace takes it to a more human level. We actually share more of ourselves, more of our company story, and it has more of that human element to it.
One of the other resources is you do these great workshops too. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I certify with Brene Brown, so I can provide the Dare to Lead program, which is very fun. We also have a program we call our Courageous Leadership Program, which anyone can come into. It's held virtually. We go into organizations and do a variety of different workshops to help team cohesion and effectiveness, but we also, do offer public workshops for people to either get trained to deliver some of our programs, or companies will send people, or individuals will say, I just am doing this to better myself. So, but it's all around this idea of courageous leadership.
You know, a lot of people find examples of work in action very relatable. Do you have an example, a success story or two you can share? Maybe not name names, but an example of maybe you were working with these individuals or this company and they were struggling with this, or they were at point A, and through your work and the expertise and understanding of it all, got them to level B.
Yeah, I'll give you an individual and a company example. So the individual, I have several of these, but there's one I wrote about in our book, and she said we could tell her story, but wanted her name changed, so we called her Christine in the book. And Christine had hit a juncture in her leadership where she had a lot going on in her life, was stressed out, and her humanity got the best of her, and she wasn't showing up as the best version of herself. And she got talked to by HR, And luckily, this organization said, we care about you and we know that, there's extenuating circumstances, and so we're going to ask you to work with a coach. And when that happened to her, there was part of her that kind of went into a shame spiral, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. But then she decided, look, this is a juncture of my leadership that I can either cower and, oh my gosh, or I can take advantage of this opportunity. And so she looked at it as an opportunity for her growth, and she looked at it as a gift. And she dug in and did the work. And we went through the immunity to change work. We looked at her self-limiting narrative. We helped her really understand that she's not 10 years old anymore. And she started to just come through the other side and thrived. And she actually was ready to move on, got a C-level position at another organization, and is just like showing up in a way where she's boundaried, she's courageous, and she's having the impact that she wants to have. So she had this juncture where she could have doubled down and just, screw you, I'm going to leave.
Right.
But she said, nope, you know what? This is one of those pivotal moments, and I'm going to take advantage of it. And so that was really cool to see. On the organizational level, we have several clients that we've done really great work with, but one of them, and I'll use their name because they let us use their name in the book, they're Hercross Chemicals. So they're a chemical company. They have, like 19 locations now. They're all over the United States. Not a glamorous, like you have truck drivers and you have warehouse workers and you have chemical operators, et cetera. Right. But they really understood that we have an opportunity to do something different. And they have a very human heart to them. And so we did the work with them to help them clarify their purpose. We built their network of culture ambassadors. And we work with them. We've done a lot of development with their leadership. We've helped create a lot of wraparound systems to help them. And a lot of that work was done pre-pandemic. And their CEO changed at the start of the pandemic. And he's like, great time to become a CEO. But he says, if we had not done this work to be clear on our purpose and our values and some of the foundational leadership development work, I don't know where we would be now. And so we pivoted a lot of stuff to virtual. We're back to doing some in-person stuff. But why I'm sharing that is that they have had record profitability over the last couple of years, despite being down-staffed, despite the pandemic challenges, despite prices going up. And they're an example of a company who's in it for the long haul. Like, it's a marathon, not a sprint, but they're doing the work and it's paying off. They've had some turnover, but not all turnover is bad turnover.
Right.
And they are able to hire people. Again, they're not perfect. They have work to do, but they are seeing it come through in the numbers because they're putting people first. And they're being intentional about these steps. It wasn't, oh, that was a nice exercise, check the box. They're always looking at what is next and how can we be thoughtful about our leadership and our culture.
You talk a lot about mindfulness, and sometimes there may be people watching right now who they've heard that expression, they've heard that word, but they're not really sure what that means. Maybe they think it's mind your P's and Q's or something, but it's really important for leaders to exhibit mindfulness. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and I think I will be the first to admit, when I hear mindfulness, I go to woo-woo meditation. And I know that there's tons of research out there, but it is not my thing. I don't sit still well. But so mindfulness absolutely can be a meditative practice and stuff like that. But honestly, at its core, mindfulness is about presence. Mindfulness is about, can I be present in this conversation versus looking at my phone or whatever? Can I pause and reduce that knee-jerk reaction to react? Can I pause before I think and respond? Can I really get clear of, gosh, I'm really feeling agitated in this moment. Maybe I need to put this conversation on a timeout. Or, wow, I'm noticing I'm getting really triggered, right? So at its core, mindfulness is about being really fully present to what we're experiencing, to what's happening. Yeah. And then there's a lot of different ways that you can help yourself learn to do that. But it's really about presence.
Authenticity, too, is very crucial, right? Tell us about why it's important to be authentic.
Because, first of all, isn't it exhausting to wear masks?
Always reacting and...
Yeah, I mean, like, we, again, going back to most of us, to some degree, are running around wearing masks, trying to hide our flaws and inadequacies, trying to be something we're not. In fact, Bob Keegan says that most organizations are paying us for a second job that they never intended and never hired us to do. And that's impression management. Mm-hmm. We are wasting time and energy trying to look favorably in the eyes of others. And so if we can't show up as our authentic self, if I feel like I have to hide a part of who I am, I say if I feel like I have to dull my sparkle, then I'm going to be exhausted at some point by the end of the day. You're not getting the best of me.
Right.
And at some point, that's going to turn into resentment. And so authenticity at its core is, are you clear about who you are? Not who you think you should be, not who you think sounds good, but who are you? And can you find a way to bring that version of you forward, that you're not one version at work than at home? I might use slightly more colorful language at home than at work, but I'm still the same me. And because trying to remember which version of me is showing up, it's not sustainable, and it adds to stress, it erodes emotional well-being, and it gets in our way of being able to innovate and grow, which is what we need today.
What about somebody who is very effective at what they do? They love their job, they love their work. They're great at being a leader, but they tend to lean quiet, shyer, more reserved. And some of these things we're talking about doesn't necessarily come naturally for them. How do you work with those folks?
One, I love for people who are quieter, maybe more introverted, I always refer them to Susan Cain's work, because she talks about the power of introversion. And actually, I work with a lot of more quiet, more shy, or introversion and being shy are not the same thing, by the way, but
Right.
more kind of reserved individuals. And they can be some of the most effective leaders because they're thoughtful, they listen, they hold a space for other people. And I think where some of those individuals get into trouble is they're not showing up authentically because they feel like there's something wrong with that. But I would rather sit with someone who's listening to me and holding space for me than a leader that fills up the space and isn't hearing me.
Right.
And so whether someone is introverted or extroverted, whether someone is outgoing or shy, it doesn't matter. It's about are you creating a courageous culture? Are you creating a space that allows others to shine?
Which is important, right? Because when they're shining, they're happy, they're content, and they're going to deliver more.
Yeah.
They want to help everything, keep the train on the track, right?
100%.
Some people don't realize that. So there are attributes of a great leader. We've discussed some of them today. What are some of the other attributes of a great leader?
So if we're talking formal people leader, right, versus, because any one of us can show up as a leader, but if I have responsibility for team, I think first and foremost, I do have to be able to show up as my authentically best self. So going back to brave leaders and courageous cultures. So am I showing up authentically? Meaning I might say, hey, team, just know I'm on the struggle bus today, but I'm trying. Am I showing up in a way where I pause, where I'm curious rather than judgmental, where I know how to set clear expectations? A lot of people flounder without clear expectations. Do I lead in a way that is fully aligned with the organization's purpose and values? Do I have deliberate practices to keep that as a guidepost for my team to reinforce that clarity, if you will? Am I walking the talk? That's a really critical, I have to lead self before I lead others. So am I embodying all of this myself and modeling it, including, gosh, I screwed up. I'm going to own my mistakes. I'm going to clean up my mess. I'm going to ask for help. And then with my team, am I giving feedback? Not just growth feedback, but recognition feedback. Am I being clear with expectations? Am I leaning into the tough conversations? Am I willing to embrace accountability, not in a shaming way, but am I willing to say, hey, we need to be accountable to this? Can I hold a clear vision? All of those things are super, super critical for us to be effective if we formally lead others as well as ourselves.
What do you say to somebody who might be in a leadership position and there's a lot of mistakes that are made, there's a lot of errors that are made, errors in judgment, maybe just lack of filling out paperwork, whatever it is, they make a ton of different mistakes, there's a lot of scripts happening. They don't admit any of them, yet they're the leader. They never admit to any of them. They brush them off, don't want to discuss them. But the minute you slip up on something, not intentionally, something happened, and you admit it and you've fixed it, but they still fixate on it and they keep telling you you've screwed up. How about that? That's got to be
fun.
frustrating. That's,
Yeah.
I know a few people that do that.
Yeah. Well, one, that is a complete lack of psychological safety. And so one of the things in the spirit of showing up as a leader that I will encourage people to try is how to stay grounded, but try to have a courageous conversation and say, help me understand. Like, I fixed this. And so help me understand what is the concern, or, you know what, the story I'm telling myself or the story I'm making up is that you don't trust that I learned from this. So can we have a conversation about it? So there's an opportunity to lean in, and not in a shaming, blaming way, but to kind of check it out. And if that person is completely not receptive, I hate to tell you, but unless that person gets coaching or does some work on themselves, it's kind of like, that's where people shut down. That's where you don't have psychological safety. You have avoidable errors. You have all kinds of issues. And so I've worked for some of those leaders before, and guess what? My trajectory was, get me the heck out of here. But you can have an opportunity to try and see, you know what, maybe this person doesn't know they're showing up that way, and they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. And you'd be surprised, you might be able to influence, but if they're completely not open to that conversation. Or they get defensive. Yep, if they get defensive and they shut down and it's not a dialogue, then I'm
the boss, you're not, that's just the way it is.
It's like, peace out.
It's time to,
time to go.
Let's talk about some of the topics. I know you do the speaking engagements and you're very passionate about that. What are some of the topics that you engage the audience with and that you present in those speaking engagements?
Oh, a lot of what I speak on is how to be a future-ready leader, how to have more human, future-ready workplaces, courageous leadership.
What is future-ready?
Future-ready is where you are literally building up the capacity for courage and helping people reconcile that insecure 10-year-old self and show up as a more enlightened adult version of themselves. And so that we do that work with teams, we do that work with individuals. And so a lot of the speaking engagements I do are helping to normalize the messiness of being human, inviting people into rethinking what does it mean to be a future-ready, courageous leader, rethinking what does it mean to have a human, effective, thriving workplace, and how to build resiliency, how to become an irresistible employer. Those are they're all kind of intertwined, but at the core of it is all about this messiness of being human, and what does it take? How do we branch off from there to be the best version of ourselves and have the best outcomes?
You're incredibly passionate and enthusiastic, and there's a real thirst for this work. Where does that come from within you, Rosie?
I think that I feel like if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, did I make a mark if sitting here with you? Did I make a mark with the person who's driving my Uber? Did I make a mark with my family? And I just feel very strongly that I have been put on this earth to try to help make a dent in whatever way that looks like. And I had those crappy work experiences. And my son just finished 6th grade. He's 12. And man, I hope by the time he gets in the workplace that these dehumanized, toxic workplaces are no longer the norm. That, you know what, we don't have movies like Horrible Bosses and shows like The Office that are funny, because unfortunately they're very commonplace, where people, that's not how, I would love to work myself out of a job, because I want a better future for our kids. Like they shouldn't have to go to work wondering if they're enough. They shouldn't have to walk through life wondering, do I belong? And then go to a workplace where they question themselves and that gets eroded and their gifts and talents don't get to be utilized.
Unsafe.
That's not okay. And so I just really want a different world for our kids. I really do.
What do you see as the future of your work?
Well, I would love to say I'd never have a job again, because it doesn't need to be happening. But I see.
I think your phone's going to ring more now.
Where you try to work yourself out of a job. What I see that is encouraging is there is so much work to be done. While there's incredible movement happening and more organizations are getting that they need to do the work and show up differently and develop their leaders differently. It's not like you need help, you need a development partner. But I'm seeing an increase, like, hey, we get this. Hey, we're struggling. I'm seeing increased pain where people are realizing, hey, we need to look at our culture differently. We need to look at our leaders differently. And so I am seeing just an increase in us doing courage building work, in us doing this work to help upshift this faulty programming we have. And I think that's really cool, because there's a lot of people on this planet. There's a lot of organizations on this planet. And that at its core, when we do that work with people, they talk about it transforms their personal relationships, it transforms their own well-being. Like that, to me, it's almost coming back full circle. I started in workplace well-being and I was like, this stuff doesn't work, because we were going about it like, who cares if you go to CrossFit and eat kale and have a wearable device if your boss treats you like crap?
Right.
Right? Who cares? Right. But you know what? When you learn to get out of your own way, when you learn to show up more authentically, when you learn to have better connections with other people, like that just goes into every fabric of your being. Mm-hmm. And that to me is really, really cool. And so I think that those opportunities are opening up, and it's really fun to be able to have an impact and watch people come to life again.
This has really been a fantastic conversation, and you're so passionate again, and so authentic and real, and the enthusiasm just exudes out of you, which is why I think you're so good at this. And this was really a joy having you stop by the studio and really open up and just share more about your work, how you do it, how you implement it, some of the success stories, and why do you want to continue doing it? I think it's fantastic. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much. This was very fun.
You enjoyed it?
I did, very much so.
Fantastic.
High five.
Go get him, Rosie. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
If you'd like to learn more about Rosie Ward and Salveo Partners LLC, visit this website, salveopartners.com. For Close-Up Television and Radio, I'm Jim Masters. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.